I will now turn it over to Alfred Herrera to introduce our speakers. Alfred and I are two authors of a triple authored book that we are promoting tomorrow. You have a flyer, you have slides. It's Power to the Transfer, Critical Race Theory in a Transfer Receptive Culture. We hope to see you at 4 p.m. tomorrow for our book signing along with Santiago Bernal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimple. So I'm really excited to announce or introduce the next speakers. I spent almost all night writing things. You know how they say you're supposed to write all this stuff and write it and write it and write it and forget about it? Well, I actually didn't write anything because I know them well. And I thought it would be better just to spend a couple of minutes talking about the work that they do, but really let you hear from them because that's what you're here for. I am really honored to introduce Eileen Strempel, who is now a UCLA member. She is the dean, the inaugural dean of the Herb Alpert School of Music at UCLA. Let's clap. She's an opera singer. She has a glamour shot in the program, so you should see that headshot. It's beautiful. There's so much I could really say about her, but all I'm going to say is that her passion for transfer students is evident in the many years that she has spent working on issues related to transfer. Her work at Syracuse and her work in Cincinnati and now her work at UCLA. She told me yesterday that they just signed some articulation for transfer students at UCLA with some local community colleges. And the stories that she told about faculty, there aren't any faculty in here, right? I'm going to talk about you anyway. The story she talks about faculty, you know, it's a really kind of a difficult challenge to have people give up some of the things that they feel so passionately about. But the opportunities available for the students that are incoming from our local community colleges to our School of Music, she and I are going to work very closely on establishing a huge bridge program for our community college in LA to come to the Herb Alpert School of Music. She's the author of some work on transfer ecosystems. You should read it. It's great work. I can go on, but I just really want to say welcome and come on up, Eileen. She's a true friend, extremely passionate about transfer students, and I'm really happy to introduce her. So now Steve. Steve, I know I'm supposed to be nice. They say you're supposed to save the best for last. No. Steve Handel is the executive director for the higher education, strategic higher education initiatives with the College Board. He really is a UC person. He did his best work when he was at UCLA 100 years ago and has spent almost his entire career focused on transfer. I've had the pleasure of doing numerous presentations and authoring several pieces with him. His work on transfer affirming culture is really important as we look at what the important elements are for students who come to our universities. He's a passionate guy about transfer. That's all I'm going to say, is that he really does walk the walk and talk the talk. It's all about transfer for Steve. He's a great guy. I'm happy to call him one of my really good friends. Steve, come on up.
Alfredo. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And lastly, I was going to ask him a question, but I think I'm going to not. Because, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, we're on. Oh, wow, there's a lot of people here. Oh, my God.
Don't make me scared.
Sorry, no, that's good. So Eileen's over there, so all of you can see Eileen. I'm over here. It might be difficult for some of you to actually see me, which actually is all to the good, right? So, well, hey, welcome all. It's great to be here. We're going to have like this mock interview. We want to talk with you about some stuff that we're very, very passionate about. In particular, a book that Eileen and I have been writing. and writing. How long has it been now? 2 full years, and we're almost done. But we're not here to sell you a book. In fact, the book's not even out yet, so we couldn't sell it to you if we wanted to. What we want to do is talk a little bit about the journey that we went on. What if, though, for instance? I have no idea what if means. There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, we got the technology going. We want to share with you a little bit of the research journal, the journey that we went on when we began to write this particular book that you can't actually buy yet. But we're almost sure that you will. It's the research journey that I think was most important for us, and most important because both of us have been involved in transfer, and the book's about that. But more importantly, what are some of the lessons that we gained, and what are some of the things that we can share with you? Because obviously Eileen and I can't do it. All of you are doing the good work, and that's a little bit of what we want to share. So that's what we're going to do. Eileen, any opening remarks? Now, you just came to UCLA, but you've been at Syracuse and Cincinnati, and you've been involved with transfer for a long time, right?
A long time. I've just been inspired so much by NISTS over the years, and so I'm so happy to see this room full of transfer champions. Whether you are new to transfer or, like Steve and I, a little old to transfer, then this is your place. We are your people. This is your community of support, and the work that you're doing is really important. So we hope today, in kind of sharing with you, that we just lay the groundwork for you to just soak up this conference and just be re-inspired and reignited by all your work in transfer. This writing of the book process, well, first of all, I will say it's only that Steve is here and I am here. It's a miracle that we survived the writing process. It is wonderful when you have a co-author that you can laugh with, because there are moments when you feel like crying, and instead Steve would make me laugh. So it's really
good.
Wonderful.
Well, that's good. No, it's been fun. But tell the audience what motivated you to write the book, okay? Both serious and not serious. And also tell the audience how you convinced me to actually go along with you in this journey, in this wacky journey that we are on.
I sometimes laugh that I kind of, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, but sometimes that gets me into trouble. So my friend Debbie Sido, who's the president of Richard Bland College, so where's our transfer? There we go, all right, Richard Bland College. When I was working at Richard Bland, Debbie and I became good friends through my ACE fellowship, where I really focused on national best practices for transfer students. And she asked if I would write this book, and when she just kind of told me, actually, to just write the book. So I just said, okay,
whatever you say.
Debbie. But then I quickly realized I really didn't want to and couldn't really write it alone. That, like most things in life, it's really better to go at it as a team. And so I know someone else who sometimes does what he's told to do, and I basically told Steve he had to write the book with me.
She's very persuasive, and honestly, though, when you work with someone like that for so many years, you can't really turn it down. And we'll talk a little bit about what that process was about. We thought it would be, kind of a lark, right? But not so much. But before we go any farther, I mean, people are looking at the title and they're kind of going, let's see, Beyond Free College, Making Higher Education Work for 21st Century Students. There's no transfer in that title. So does this book have any relevance at all for this particular group?
Well, actually, I have to say that Stephen and I, in writing the book, decided to take head-on the whole issue of free college. And we actually provocatively decided to take that on even in the title. When we started out, I think we thought of transfer in a very very, very different way. We were really thinking of 2-year to 4-year institution, and we've been working in transfer for years, sometimes at 2-year institutions, sometimes at 4-year institutions, and we knew what we were gonna write, except we didn't write that book. Because what we found out is transfer is huge. And when we really started to look at all the data from all the types of credits that today's students are accumulating everywhere, we realized that transfer that we thought was just this little tiny thing was actually a huge forest. And it was full of rich complexities that both delighted and enticed us, but more to come in that in a moment.
Well, let's get into that. So the more things change, the more they kind of stay the same. And I think we started out thinking that, well, we would write a set of chapters based on our own experience, and that would be kind of fun and swell because we've been doing a lot of stuff in that area, and then we would just sort of write it up and send it along. But we actually learned a few things along the way, didn't we?
It's very humbling. And here's the gift of research and researching in middle age is that you find out sometimes the things you thought were 100% wrong. It's very humbling. And so writing this book was a really humbling experience in things that perhaps I was skeptical about when I began. I ended up becoming a huge fan of, for instance, prior learning assessment. For those of you out there wondering about prior learning assessment, you come hear our talk later for get some more details. But if a student earns 9 credits from prior learning assessment, they're 2.5 times as likely to graduate. 2.5. So I went from a total skeptic to a total convert because of the compelling research that the two of us just managed to stumble our way through. So it's a humbling thing that you can be surprised, you can find out you're exactly wrong, and you can find out that writing a book is a lot harder than you think it is.
Well, let's find out what's still working. I mean, and this will not be a surprise. I mean, I've had the argument with Janet Marling. Over the years, honestly, my focus was always on sort of 2-year to 4-year. So we all know that transfer got started well over 100 years ago, and that the original idea, right, was to provide opportunities for students in community colleges to make their way to 4 years and have access to baccalaureate degrees and all the riches that come after that. That remains true to this day. And honestly, it remains, for me at least, the most transformative part of American higher education. There's a lot of great things in American higher education, but honestly, nothing, I think, any more transformative than that. I mean, think about it. Most of my career was spent at the University of California, near a quarter of a century, and part of that at UCLA, go Bruins. But it's a very highly selective system, and yet that system is very responsive to transfers. One of the most highly selective systems in America opens its arms to those students. And so here we have a situation in which a student can begin at an open access institution, and yet by dint of their own hard work and the great instruction of faculty at those community colleges, because that can then go to places like UCLA, and be at a level perhaps unknown. So it's been a place where students who might not otherwise get to college, particularly the best colleges in the world, have an opportunity. So that's still working. So what was great is we did the research, and we go, well, that's working. And in fact, when we think about this, I mean, this is a quote from William Rainey Harper, who was one of the original visionaries. When you read that, you kind of go, wow, he could be on this stage right now as well. He would be a booster. He was the president of the University of Chicago then, even then a very elite institution, and yet was one of those progressives that said, you know what, we have to open the doors wider. So that historical part of it is still true, happy to say. But what's different now, at least for me, is...
So is it all good now?
Well, it's not all good. What we find, of course, and this is what you folks know as well as anyone, is that while that door is open, it's not wide enough, right? I mean, the idea here is that we need even more diversity. We need even more access to the best institutions in America. And more importantly, as we'll talk about, we need to make sure that students get certificates and degrees. Just having an open door isn't enough. It's completion, now more than ever, that I think we're going to need to work on. That's it, we're done. Good night, everybody. Thank you. The other part of it, and I'll go there, the other part of this, of course, is a conclusion that we reach in the book, and it's sort of summarized there. That in fact, if you do have the means, if you do have the wherewithal, you can go to a community college and you can transfer to a 4-year institution. But many of our marginalized students, in fact, what we may call neo-traditional students, and Eileen will define that in a minute, are forced in a way to go to a community college. And I mean that in no pejorative kind of way. I mean that they may not have the kinds of choices, don't have the kinds of choices that a lot of students have. And that we don't invest in community colleges as we should. And so the completion rates and a variety of other things just aren't as strong. So while that open door is there, right, the idea is that we need to open that door and that we also need to equalize. that situation in the sense that we're working closely with our 4-year institutional colleagues, our 2-year institutional colleagues, and everyone else sort of in between.
So if transfer is hobbled in this day and meeting the needs of all of our students, this book is actually not a list of everything that's wrong, but actually one of the things that we really became inspired by in this book is the transformative power of transfer and transfer writ large. And we discovered that transfer students, wherever they're coming from or wherever they're getting their credits from, that transfer is one of the most powerful agents for change. And you all in this room are the ones that help make transfer work. So you actually have that frontline responsibility, pleasure, and really and joy of helping to make transfer's potential be realized. So students are transferring, they're transferring credits from a variety of ways. And we have a kind of little quote from Shapiro here. Transfer is the norm, not the exception. And actually what we did is we started to look at credits all the way back in high school that students accumulate either through International Baccalaureate, from early college high school or dual credit. We started to look at all the different credits for the whole life cycle, whether it was online, face-to-face, whether it involved prior learning assessment or competency-based learning. And what does this all mean? Most students today are acquiring credits from at least 3 different places before they graduate. And also, students are becoming more and more diverse. And so it was really fun in the process of writing this book to really coin the term neo-traditional student. They're not post-traditional age or non-traditional students. This is the new normal, folks, and you all know this. This is your daily lived experience.
So I put some of them up on the screen there. Does that really much cover the waterfront, you think? I mean, they're certainly come to us older, right? I mean, transfer, not just transfer, but the students that we see, the students that you see, have a lot of characteristics that 18-year-olds don't have, right?
Yeah, and we could add to this DACA, international students, veterans, right? We could keep going on and on and on, right? Students are accumulating credits from a variety of different sources, and also a lot of workplace-based credit is also being accumulated. So the whole trend of transfer is really at this point suffused the entire well of educational. It's no longer just a pipeline, it's kind of a reservoir of transfer credit. So really thinking about it that way rather than little pieces that come very linearly and in a very organized fashion. It's not that. It's really a well of academic learning, and you are all charged with kind of piecing that together into some of the forms of academic credentialing that we're more used to see.
I would add as well that in the book, I don't know if any of you have read, Nathan Graw has a book called Demographics and the Future of Higher Education. If you haven't read it, I recommend it to you. It's a relatively short book, but it has some powerful statements about what higher education is going to look like in the next 10 or 15 years. And guess what? If we want to keep our doors open, if in fact we want to be responsive to the people in our communities, it isn't going to be the 18 to 22-year-old set, because that's going to plummet significantly. In fact, we see that in many places around the country, in the Northeast in particular, and in the Midwest. High school graduates are drying up. Now, for all of you folks who have been involved for transfer for years, you've been saying that for years, and you've also been saying, we have to reach out to a different clientele, or a broader clientele. Well, if your president didn't believe it before, your president's going to believe it now. Because in order to make those enrollment goals, we're going to have to reach out to these students, and in ways far more significant than we've ever had to do that before.
It's pretty amazing. So where does that all leave us? That really leaves us thinking a lot about state and federal policy, and that it can be this force for positive good. And we really took inspiration from the GI Bill. So I know you're all hearing almost every day in the news with one presidential candidate or another talking about free college, and we say, yes, but it's not enough. And it's, here's the GI Bill, it's decades old, 7 decades old, is that
Yep.
right? Yeah. But it is completely relevant today. Folks, we did it before as a country, we can do it again. And just when we had World War II vets returning, they were skilled, they were ready to go, and we knew as a country if we didn't mobilize and make a difference, that they wouldn't be part of a full American society. And so what did we do? The GI Bill not only made sure that their tuition was paid for, it recognized that most of these returning vets had families. It took care of their housing, took care of their food, childcare, all the things that people are aghast that we should be thinking of paying for today. And I'm saying, folks, we have done it before. This is a moment in time, I think through the writing of the book, that we became more and more excited that this is the time to really reenact the GI Bill, but for a much broader, more diverse and inclusive population, right? It was mainly white guys coming back from the war. And so this really needs to be a reimagining of the Platonic ideal of American democracy. And so that's really inspiring to us.
Well, but even the more pragmatic part of that, because if you think about, you think about guys my age, or maybe my parents, humor me, won't you? But when we think about that, I mean, when you read the history right after the war, it's eerily, I'm reminiscent of right now. We had a ton of people who had skill but no degrees, right? We had a new economy that was going to die, frankly, if nobody had the right skills to do the jobs. So they needed to be skilled. These were folks with families, or wanted to start families, and they didn't have a lot of money. I mean, they'd been to war, right? And they weren't making a lot of money if you survived that particular war. So here they were coming back. Well, when we think of America right now, what do we think about? Well, it's not the Industrial Revolution, right? It's more the Internet Revolution. But we know that lifelong learning is going to be part and parcel of that. The new populations that we've been talking about, well, they're starting at a lot of different kinds of colleges and universities, but they're not getting degrees, or at least they're not getting degrees in sufficient numbers. And they're going to need those degrees, right, to be part of the American middle class and beyond. These are also individuals that, in this new Gilded Age, all of us, I think, are less rich than we'd want to be, and the rich are far richer than they should be. We don't have many of these folks don't have the kinds of resources they need to just drop everything and go to UCLA full-time. So they're going to need opportunities to be able to go to school, and go to school in ways that are meaningful. And then more than that, I mean, many of you, and I retired from the University of California a couple of years ago. One of the things that we were really just then beginning to grapple with was homelessness among our students, food security among our students. I'm not sure we got a good handle on it. I was there, but at least the issues out there, I know that we thought about that, read about that. And so all of that resonated. So we thought, well, what kind of policy could we dream up? And the GI Bill was the one that sort of came to us in a flash, sort of saying, we know that Republicans and Democrats are very, very split, but policy can be a force for good if we think about it well and if we resource it well. So a lot of what the book is, not about the GI Bill, but that same sort of transference, if you will. And I think it's going to be important going forward as we think about the different proposals that we keep good social policy in mind, because it did work, it did make a difference, and it can in the future.
And the thing about the GI Bill is it had broad bipartisan support. And so even though people originally might say, like my brother, I got into a lovely discussion about this with him. He and I have little different political views. I don't know if you have mixed families out there. And he said, well, I think that all the stuff you're talking about, that's a fortune, that's a huge amount of money. And I said, well, actually that's a really good point. But the thing is, we're thinking about the wrong thing. It's not about access, it's about support. And that support does cost more upfront. I'm not denying that. However, if we look at the end result of what we really want, which is degree production, it's $5,600 cheaper per degree, because so many more people complete their education and make their educational dreams come true. Over $5,600 cheaper. That's amazing. And so when we think about the cost of doing it, I think both Steve and I are on the same page. We think about the costs of not doing it are far greater to our society. So what does that all mean for you out there as practitioners, right? How do we turn that back around? And so Steve, I don't know if you're thinking about, advice to after this process of writing the book and all the things we've been thinking about over the past couple of years, what's some advice you might leave with folks?
Don't write a book. That would be the first thing. No, writing a book was was a great leveler for an old guy like me to sort of revisit some traditional transfer notions that I had, and then to be able to say, yeah, it's bigger, it's better. It's no longer a backwater, right? I mean, we're at the center. We are at the center of most of the higher education trends that we see coming along. As Eileen mentioned, prior learning credit, competency-based education, dual credit, online learning. We're at the center of all that right now. This is not a conference off to the side. You folks are in the center of making the change that needs to happen. So we urge you to do what Theodore Roosevelt urged many others in a different generation to do as well. Do what you can do where you are. Even if it's not a book, do all of the things that you're already doing. If it's not writing, it's supporting, it's advising, it's mentoring, it's partnering. It's all of these things. And we want to encourage you to do exactly that. And to do what Janet mentioned early on with this particular conference is to stop for a moment, take it all in, have your assumptions be challenged, engage in argument, and then think about what's going to work for you and for your students on your particular campuses.
And I guess I would say that, for me, finding NISTS was really finding a community of like-minded folks. Transfer champions are the most student-centered people I know. And so I would just urge you as you attend this conference, as you go to sessions that intrigue you or challenge you, just to stay connected to that student-centeredness and then reimagine what that might look like today. Reimagine and rethink what might it be if I'm a transfer champion and I'm thinking about students who have housing insecurity, who have food insecurity, who might need a place to nurse, who might come to the table with credits from a variety of different sources and really need an advocate to help them navigate the system. So what would that mean in your daily life if you really proactively engaged and created a transfer receptive ecosystem in your own world, wherever that is, knowing that you're making the educational dreams for others possible? You have such an important role. I salute you for being here, and just enjoy the rest of this amazing conference. Chat with someone new. Make sure you make a point of saying hi to someone right next to you that maybe you didn't come with, or look behind you if you need a new friend on the way out the door here from going on to your next session. But thank you so much for being here and for supporting the conference and for all that you do for transfer.
Go forth and do good.
Eileen, Steve, thank you both for your insights, for challenging us to think about things a little bit differently. I think it's very important that we think historically. History has a tendency to repeat itself, as we all know, so thank you for grounding what we're doing today in our past. I really appreciate the opportunity to think about that reimagining the transfer student experience. And as we think that through, this conference truly is about those tools that will get you to the how. And we hope you'll take advantage of those. Some of the ways that we want to ensure that you have a great experience, I want to share those with you. You perhaps have already registered yourself to be a part of our conference app. If not, you'll want to do that. There's signage all around the conference to help you. We have an information desk if you have any questions. That is where you can find a rich way of communicating with one another throughout, as well as your schedule. Please remember to refresh your button as often as you can, because as we send out announcements, you're going to want to refresh your areas there. So if you can feel the warmth in the room, it means there's lots of bodies, right? This is a particularly large conference for us. This hotel space is maxed out. We're really, really excited about that. What that presents us with is opportunities to really get to know each other well. By that, I mean our sessions will be full. We will be sharing seats next to one another. For those of you who feel a little bit uncomfortable with that, just plan in advance to get to your session early, get to your seat that you would like to go to, and then also make sure that you have plans A, B, and C in your back pocket in case your sessions are full. So just be respectful, and if you end up in a line at the coffee bar, just be sure and say hello to the person next to you in line. If we think about our reflection, we're really big on reflection. As part of your app and attached to each one of our concurrent sessions, there's a reflection sheet that encourages you to think through what you've learned, how you want to frame some of the things that you've learned to help you with that reimagining process. So use that tool as often as you can. Dimple and Alfred mentioned the book signing with the two of them and also Santiago. So just know that that's coming up tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Also, we have our networking breakfast tomorrow morning starting at 7:30, but it is a come and go, and it's on the back side of this particular ballroom. We welcome you to have some time with affinity groups. In particular, we are looking at institutional type, where you have a table for faculty members, researchers, system representatives. If there's not a table that suits your affinity group, we have extra signs for you to launch your affinity group, so that will be great. The NISTS staff is here to support you throughout your time here. Look for us in different spots. We have a cadre of volunteers, and I want to thank each and every one of you who have given of your personal time to be a part of our conference process. And finally, our sponsors are a critical part of how we are able to bring this to you. We put them front and center with you often throughout the conference. We have a generous schedule for them to be available to you, so please make sure that you spend some time at their tables and get an understanding of what they are bringing to the conference as well. We do hope that we will get a chance to learn from one another at both our concurrent sessions, but also tonight at our opening reception and the poster session, just again, right next to us here, and that will start promptly at 5:30 tonight. So we are thrilled that you are here. We're going to learn lots together. Let's take a couple of deep breaths and let's reimagine the transfer student experience. Welcome and have a great conference.